In 2011, a Swedish diving team was scanning the floor of the Baltic Sea when their sonar picked up something strange. At first, they didn't think much of it. The ocean is full of weird shapes, and sonar isn't always reliable. But then they looked closer. The image didn't blur or fade. It sharpened. What appeared on the screen was a massive object sitting alone on the seafloor, nearly 200 feet wide, almost perfectly circular. Not a shipwreck, not a reef, just a shape that didn't seem to belong there. The more they studied it, the more unsettling it became. The surface didn't look random. There were straight lines, sharp edges, what some described as corridor-like grooves etched into it. Things you don't normally associate with something that's supposed to be natural. People online quickly started comparing it to a crashed spacecraft or some kind of sunken structure. And honestly, it wasn't hard to see why. Eventually, the team decided to dive down and see it for themselves, and that's when things got uncomfortable. As they approached the object, their equipment began to fail. Cameras shut off, satellite phones stopped working, compasses spun aimlessly. But the moment they moved away from the object, everything came back online, as if nothing had happened. No one could explain why a single spot on the ocean floor seemed to interfere with electronics. The divers later described the surface as oddly smooth, almost like it had been melted or burned. In some places, it looked scraped, like the object had been dragged across the seabed before stopping. And that detail raises a disturbing question, because if it left a trail, that means it didn't always sit there. Scientists eventually stepped in with an explanation. A glacial deposit, a strange formation left behind thousands of years ago when massive sheets of ice retreated and reshaped the ocean floor. It sounds reasonable until you remember that glaciers don't usually create symmetry. They don't carve straight lines, and they definitely don't interfere with modern technology. To this day, no one has gone back and fully examined the anomaly. There are no clear photographs, no definitive answers, just sonar images, second-hand accounts, and a mystery sitting silently beneath the Baltic Sea. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a rock formation we don't fully understand. But whatever it is, it doesn't look natural, and nature doesn't usually build circles. Off the coast of India, beneath water that looks calm and ordinary from the surface, something enormous is hiding. It wasn't discovered by accident. It showed up on sonar scans, long, straight lines stretching across the seafloor. At first, researchers thought they were looking at natural rock formations, but the more they mapped the area, the harder that explanation became to believe. What they found looked deliberate. Massive stone walls, road-like paths, foundations laid out in patterns that only make sense if someone planned them. The structures stretched for miles, forming what appeared to be an entire submerged settlement. Not a single ruin, but a city, and not just any city. One that shouldn't exist. When samples were taken and tested, the results were unsettling. Carbon dating suggested parts of the site were over 9,000 years old. That's thousands of years before the rise of Mesopotamia, before Egypt, before anything we're taught to call civilization. According to history, humans at that time were still hunter-gatherers. They weren't building cities, they weren't laying roads. And yet, something down there says otherwise. That's where the theories begin to fracture. Some researchers believe the structures belong to a coastal civilization that existed during the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower. As the ice melted, the ocean slowly rose, swallowing the land and whatever was built on it, not destroyed overnight, just quietly erased, inch by inch, until it disappeared beneath the waves. Others think the implications are even more disturbing. If an advanced society existed that early, it means human history isn't a straight line of progress. It means we may have risen before and fallen completely. No written records, no surviving monuments above water, just stone sitting in the dark, waiting to be found. What makes this harder to dismiss is how widespread the ruins appear to be. This isn't a single structure or an isolated anomaly. The formations cover a vast area, suggesting thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of people once lived there. They built homes. They walked those roads. They had routines, relationships, lives. And then the ocean came. There are no stories passed down about this place, no myths that clearly name it, just a gap, a silence in our timeline where something should be. And that silence raises an uncomfortable question. What if the first great human civilization didn't collapse from war or famine or disease? What if it didn't fall at all? What if it drowned? Because if the ocean could erase an entire world once, there's nothing stopping it from doing it again. During World War II, hundreds of submarines disappeared beneath the ocean's surface and never came back. In many cases, there was no final transmission, no distress call, no explanation. They simply vanished, taking their crews with them. For decades, families were left without answers, and historians assumed the truth had been lost to the sea. Then, years later, something unsettling began to happen. Missing submarines started to reappear. Advances in sonar and deep-sea exploration led researchers to the ocean floor, where they expected to find twisted wreckage, evidence of explosions, depth charges, or catastrophic failure. Instead, they found submarines resting quietly on the seabed, upright, intact, almost peaceful. Some were located in places they were never recorded as reaching, far off their known patrol routes, as if they had drifted or been guided somewhere else entirely. What disturbed investigators most wasn't just where these submarines were found, it was the condition they were in. Many showed no signs of battle, no hull breaches, no scorch marks, no obvious reason they should have sunk at all. The hatches were closed, everything appeared sealed, as if the crews had simply gone about their duties and never returned. Inside, there were no bodies, no clear explanation for what happened to dozens of trained sailors locked inside a steel vessel in the middle of the ocean. Some theories suggest mechanical failure or oxygen depletion, slow and silent. Others point to toxic gas leaks or systems that failed without warning. All plausible, none entirely satisfying. Because submarines are designed for emergencies. Crews are trained for worst-case scenarios. And yet, in case after case, there was no attempt to escape, no emergency surfacing, no signals sent, just silence. And then there's the timing. Some of these submarines were found decades later, preserved by cold, dark water, as if time barely touched them, not destroyed, not reclaimed, just waiting, frozen in their final moments. The ocean, it seems, didn't tear them apart. It didn't scatter them into debris fields. It held onto them. Today, these submarines remain where they were found, protected as war graves. No full answers, no final explanations, just steel shells resting in the dark, with stories sealed inside. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Not that they were lost in battle, but that they were taken quietly. The ocean didn't sink them, it kept them.